All right. Yes, you interrupted happy time at Tuesday morning connection service. I was just rolling before the Lord. We thought we'd bring some joy to you today. Glad to see everybody. Are you smiling? Are you laughing? Are you happy? Are you righteous? Are you knowing that all your steps are ordered by the Lord this morning? Hopefully. So come on, let's give thanks. God, we give thanks today for this day, for this moment, for this message, for this momentum. We give thanks that we are fully awake to ourselves, to others, and to the God working in, through, and as us. Let this word be a healing balm. Let it be life to our soul. We receive it now, for it's in the name and nature of the Christ. Can you say amen, Pastor LaDonna?
Amen. You know why you did that, right? It's because your name is Simon. Simon, and I love to do drawings. All right, so that is another of the 5 million inside jokes my brother and I have. It never ends. Good morning. Welcome to Tuesday Morning Connection. And let's start with our morning blessing. Spirit of truth, we give thanks today for our connection in this time of togetherness, for our sameness as well as our contrast, and for the light we reflect to one another and see in one another. We give thanks for the holy that holds us and for the humanity that always brings us back to the holy. We ask that our happiness, our peace, and our joy now be woven into the fabric of the world around us, and that it serve as nourishment to feed the heart of the collective in the name and nature of the Christ. Amen. And so it is. Okay, so I love the fact that we have fun, and I'm very proud that my brother has not lost as old as he gets. First of all, as old as he gets, I'm always older. Secondly, though, I'm glad that he has not allowed age to dim his sense of humor in any way. So let me just say thank you for that. Yes, always young. So our quotes. The first one from Lauren Isley. If there is magic on this planet, it is contained in water. Next, Leonardo da Vinci. Water is the driving force of all nature. Next, from Lucretius. The fall of dropping water wears away the stone. Next, human nature is like water. It takes the shape of its container. From Prasad Mahiz, the mind is like water. When it's turbulent, it's difficult to see. When it's calm, everything becomes clear. And lastly, one more from Leonardo da Vinci. In time and with water, everything changes. All right, so it's probably no surprise after hearing those quotes to surmise that today we're going to be talking about water. Specifically, a quote that I believe is attributed to Bruce Lee, but the original concept came from the writings of the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu in something called the Tao Te Ching, and that quote is, "Be like water." Bruce Lee, of course, was probably the greatest martial artist who ever lived, and when asked about how it was possible for him to move his body in the way that he did, this was his answer. But the concept extended to his state of mind as well. He said, empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water into a cup and it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle and it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot and it becomes that. Water can flow and it can crash. Be water, my friend. Okay, so let's get started. I want to back up a bit before we get to the lessons we can learn from the Tao Te Ching about becoming like water and read you something by our friend Andrew Martin. Week before last, my brother talked about being at peace with our own internal navigation system, with that still small voice inside us that belongs to, as Bruce Lee mentioned, our formless higher self, that part of us that's not bound by a physical body. Let's begin with why we need it. Why is it even important to have this personal internal GPS? Well, because we live in a world of duality and free will. And therefore, whether we believe and accept it or not, everything in our life is a result of a decision we have made. Also, again, whether we believe and accept it or not, regardless of how it feels sometimes, we always have a choice. So Andrew Martin is talking here about a very important choice we all must make at some point. He's saying this in the context of some oracle cards that he's describing. The first one is called Suffering in Silence, and the picture on it is of a woman sitting on top of a little cliff overlooking a really dry desert space with a couple of dangerous and formidable mountain peaks off in the distance in front of her. And here is his interpretation of this scene. He says, do you remember those books from when you were a kid that were part of that genre, Choose Your Own Adventure? These were books where you would read up to a certain point, and then it would ask you to choose one path or another. And depending on which you chose, you'd be directed to skip ahead to a certain page number and continue on that path. Each path and each of your choices had a different outcome. So your choice here with this card is, are you ready to let go of suffering in silence? Are you ready to stop playing the victim? Are you ready to stop pretending you are powerless? Are you ready to stop pointing your finger at everybody else as the source of your problems? There's this idea that says, in order to learn, pain is necessary. And I don't buy that. Certainly, pain, struggle, and suffering are part of the human experience that sometimes seem inevitable and unavoidable. And they are certainly an effective way to learn, but they are not the only way to learn. Okay, now time out. A couple of weeks ago, I referred to another talk of Andrew's that I disagreed with a little, where he was making a similar point. And I think I said something to the effect of, yes, lessons can be learned without suffering and struggle, but they don't necessarily make as lasting an impression as the ones that hurt a little do. And then I followed by saying, I don't know why that's the case, and I wish it weren't, but it just seems to be true. And I still believe that. However, I also believe that you can reach a level of consciousness where your lessons can be learned gently, but it's a pretty high level, and you have to have done some inner work in order to get there. So I just wanted to make that clear before starting so it wouldn't seem like I'm contradicting something I said earlier. He continues, do you have to be in pain to learn? Do you have to struggle to grow? Only you can answer these questions. And as I just said, unfortunately, many people do because they haven't put the work in on themselves to be on a level of consciousness to learn any other way than through pain and through suffering. All right, so this is the first place we'll stop and make a connection to water in today's teaching. On Sunday, 2 days ago, we sang a song called Welcome Into This Place that we've sung around here for many, many years. And the original lyrics, the way I first learned the song years ago, was welcome into this place, welcome into this broken vessel. But some years after that, we changed that line to say welcome into this open vessel because we wanted to move away from the idea that we were broken. At that time, we were just coming into the revelation that we are not born in sin and shaped in iniquity, that we are not worthless, lowly wretches in need of salvation. So it made sense to us at that time, at that point in time, to say instead of that we were open vessels rather than broken vessels. But that's only coming from one perspective. That is only one layer of meaning. So as I stood there on Sunday singing that song, I was reminded of the original way we used to sing it, welcome into this broken vessel. And a thought occurred to me that related to this teaching today, which I had already been working on. Yes, it is the optimal situation for us to invite God's presence into our lives of our own free will, to say, welcome into this vessel of mine that is open to your guidance and your wisdom and your love, God. However, if we're not open to that, sometimes the circumstances of life have to give us a little nudge. Yes, we have free will and we can make our own choices, but if we continue to make choices that go against our true nature, which is our divine nature, if we continue to choose the path that leads us away from our true self, which is our higher self, our Christ self, then nature itself has to do something to get us back on to a better path. Have you ever heard that phrase, nature is self-correcting? That's what it means. Life itself will always try to bring back balance where there is imbalance, and we can fight it if we want to, but that makes for a very rough path and a very difficult life. So like I've said before, Spirit will tap you lightly on the shoulder. It will whisper in that still small voice, choose this path. And if you don't listen, it has to get a little louder, and the tap becomes a punch or a slap, and the whisper becomes a scream. Very similar is this concept of open versus broken. You can open your heart and your mind to the leading of the Spirit within you, your higher self, or you can be broken open. It is your choice. It's just like a dam breaking. A dam can only hold water back for so long, and only a certain amount of water under a certain amount of pressure. Once the volume and the strength of the water surpasses that of the dam, it will break, and water always wins in the end. Just ask anyone who lives in New Orleans. Water symbolizes spirit. So the water or the spirit within you knows you are divine. And as such, it wants you to choose the path that leads toward the realization of your own divinity. It's like the stream that naturally flows to the river, that naturally flows to the ocean. God is the ocean, and we are all streams that came from the ocean and will eventually make our way back to it. And any dam that we construct, that we put up in our life that would impede that natural flow will eventually be broken. So the only question is, will you open the gate willingly, or will you have to wait for the water to break it down? Back to Andrew. I'll repeat those last few lines from him. Do you have to be in pain to learn? Do you have to struggle to grow? Only you can answer these questions. Okay, so it's up to you. Will you open up to the leading of the Spirit willingly, or wait for your choices and decisions to break you? He, Andrew Martin, then moves to a different card that he describes as the alternative choice to the suffering in silence card. And remember, he's doing all of this in the context of the choose your adventure type books. He's saying that suffering in silence, where there's a picture of a woman sitting on a cliff in a dry desert valley with two steep, formidable mountains in front of her, that's one path you can choose. But then he describes a second card, which again is the alternate choice. This card is called Fulfillment of Wishes, and it pictures a person that instead of being on a cliff in the desert is standing on this huge green lily pad looking plant in between two beautiful waterfalls, which he says are representing the masculine and the feminine, on either side, with a chest full of treasure sitting in front of him. Let's don't forget what we were just talking about, the significance of water, which is spirit. In this card, it's represented by two flowing waterfalls, which means the person pictured on the card is choosing to follow the guidance of spirit in their life. So he continues on talking about this choice between these two paths, one where you're flowing with the water, with the spirit, and one where you've gotten so far away from the water, or you've built so many dams around you in your life that are blocking and resisting the flow of spirit that you are in a desert. He says every soul comes here with a laundry list of things they want to experience and learn, etc. And you can learn to bake that cake in a 5-star kitchen or in a roach and rat infested kitchenette. It's up to you. Either way, you're going to learn, because that's what you came here to do. How you learn, though, is up to you. The quality of your experience is up to you. Option 1 is suffering in silence. Or you can say, okay, I'm at the bottom. The only way I can go from here is up. And you can ask Spirit to remind you how to learn from the upward spiral instead of through pain, suffering, and struggle. Ask Spirit to help you know how to learn through connection, flow, ease, and expansion. Ask Spirit to let your learning partners be joy and fulfillment, excitement, creativity, and collaboration, rather than partners in pain. And we're all familiar with those relationships where the only time you get together is to talk about how miserable you are. Misery loves company. So you go out together and get drunk or eat too much or buy too much and continue to numb yourselves by bouncing your respective misery off each other, only making it bigger for both of you. And you leave the evening saying, yeah, we had such a great talk and they totally get me and know how I feel, when really all you did was validate each other's victim story. Those are not friends. Those are partners in pain. The other option is to choose a different path. When you choose to go toward your higher self, all of a sudden, your partners become beauty and wisdom and power, and you literally have a chest full of everything you need right in front of you. So which track will you choose? Which adventure will you embark on? Okay, so we're going to move ahead now and dig a little deeper into this holy book or ancient book of philosophy that I mentioned earlier called the Tao Te Ching, where this concept, be like water, comes from. Because being like water and mimicking the way it moves and behaves is a really good way to make sure you're following your internal navigation system that will assist you in making the most beneficial choices in your life. We're going to begin with a talk by a man named Raymond Tang, who has a lot of insight into this particular verse of the Tao Te Ching that actually states, the highest good is like water. Water gives life to the 10,000 things and does not strive. It flows in places men reject, and so is like the Tao. In English, Tao just means the way. In dwelling, be close to the land. In meditation, go deep in the heart. In dealing with others, be gentle and kind. In speech, be true. In ruling, be just. In business, be competent. In action, watch the timing. No fight, no blame. So that's one interpretation. In a minute, we'll hear one that's a little bit different. It was written in Chinese 2,600 years ago, so there are a few different variations. So here are some thoughts about that passage from Raymond Tang. He says, you may know this feeling. You wake up to multiple unread notifications on your cell phone. Your calendar is already packed with meetings, sometimes double or triple booked. You feel engaged. You feel busy. In fact, you feel productive. But at the end of it all, it still feels like something is missing. You try to figure out what it is, but before you do, the next day comes and it all starts over again. That was how I felt 2 years ago. I felt stressed. I felt anxious. I felt a bit trapped. The world around me was moving very quickly, and I didn't know what to do. Okay, so he was at a place where he had a choice to make. Was he going to continue down the path he was currently on, or was he going to choose a different adventure? He said, I started looking for answers. I spoke to my friends, coworkers, and family. I read many self-help books, but I couldn't find anything that was satisfactory. In fact, the more self-help books I read, the more stressed and anxious I became. It was like I was feeding my mind junk food and was becoming mentally obese. Okay, so I want to stop here for a minute and focus on what he's saying. So he's at this crossroads in life and he feels like he can't keep traveling down the same path he's been on, but everything he's doing to try to get himself onto another path isn't working because he's not able to take all the information that's coming in and actually put it to use. So it's just backing up in his life and making him what he calls mentally obese because there is no outlet for it. He's just reading and reading and reading, and his mind is getting fatter and fatter and fatter. In keeping with our analogy today, the water behind his dam is just building and building and getting higher and higher. So he was about to give up when he found this book called the Tao Te Ching, which he said was the shortest of the books he read. So it contained the least information, but it was exactly what he needed to read to get him out of this funk he was in, this rut, this valley of indecision. Reading it provided him with an alternate path and a way to, most importantly, a way to navigate it. He then reads the passage that he describes as making chills run up his spine, and it's the one about water. He reads, "The supreme goodness is like water. It benefits all things without contention. In dwelling, it stays grounded. In being, it flows to depths. In expression, it is honest. In confrontation, it stays gentle. In governance, it does not control. In action, it aligns to timing. It is content with its nature and therefore cannot be faulted. Ever since the first day I read these words, this is him talking, I've been trying to apply the concepts to my day-to-day life. And there are three main lessons I've learned so far. They have helped me find greater fulfillment in almost everything that I do. The first is humility. When water flows through a riverbed, it stays low, helps all the plants along the banks grow, and provides nourishment for all surrounding animal life. It does all this without drawing any attention to itself. It has no need for reward or recognition. It is humble, but without its contribution, life as we know it would not exist. This humility taught me the following. Instead of acting like I know what I'm doing or that I have all the answers, it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know. How about that? I want to learn more and I need help. With this humble mindset, I was able to form richer connections with the people around me. All streams eventually flow to the ocean because it's lower than them. When you stay low, when you are humble, it is easier for things to flow to you. The second lesson I learned from water is about harmony. If we think about water flowing toward a rock, when it reaches the rock, it simply flows around it. It doesn't get upset. It doesn't get angry. It doesn't get agitated. When faced with an obstacle in its path, somehow water finds a solution without force and without conflict. When I began to think about that, I realized why I had been feeling stressed out and anxious in the first place. Instead of working in harmony with my environment, I was fighting against it. I was trying to force things to change because I was consumed by the need to succeed and to prove myself. This only made me more frustrated. By simply shifting my focus from trying to achieve more and be more successful to trying to achieve more harmony, I immediately felt calm and focused. I asked questions like, will this action bring me greater harmony and bring harmony to my environment? Does this action align with my true nature? In this way, I became more comfortable being my true self. Work then became easier because I stopped focusing on things I cannot control and I stopped fighting with myself. I learned to work with my environment instead of against it in order to solve problems. Nature does not hurry, yet everything gets accomplished. That's the Tao Te Ching's way of describing the power of harmony. Just as water is able to find a solution without force or conflict, I believe we can find a greater sense of fulfillment in our endeavors by shifting our focus from achieving more success to achieving more harmony. All right, so there was a whole lot in that second lesson. I want to break it down a little and give you a few examples of how we can utilize that philosophy right now with some things that are going on around us. He's talking about how water behaves when it comes up against an obstacle in its path. What lesson can we learn from water in this instance, and how does that translate into our behavior? For this, I'm going to go back to Andrew Martin. This is what he has to say about water and how we can behave like water when we face obstacles. He says, water is the embodiment of the perfect balance between masculine and feminine, of the receptive and the assertive, because water takes the shape of whatever container it's in, but does not get attached to the container. We can look at water in a glass and think, wow, that glass is really controlling that water. But not really, because the minute you turn the glass to the side, the water pours right out. The water never tries to hang on to its container. Water is not resistant. Water is simultaneously receptive and assertive, existing in whatever container surrounds it, whether it's a riverbed or a swimming pool. The container only forms it for the moment. And if while flowing down the river it encounters a big rock, the water doesn't stop and have a breakdown. It just moves around it. It goes over and under and around it at the same time. And over time, it dissolves it and thus goes right through it. All right, so I want to stop right here and apply this principle to a current event. I don't watch much news anymore, but occasionally I will turn it on, or my husband or my parents will be watching it, and I'll see it. So a couple of weeks ago, I started hearing about this baby formula shortage, and they were showing empty grocery store shelves and interviewing mothers who were wringing their hands over this. And not to be too insensitive here, but my first impression was, what is all the whining about? Babies have been being born for thousands upon 10,000s of years now. The first baby formula was not even invented until 1860 and was not available in the United States until 1869. So that's basically only 150 years that baby formula has even been a thing. Yet somehow babies have lived and thrived for thousands of years before that. Now, I know some women have issues that make it impossible for them to breastfeed, or their lifestyle makes it inconvenient, but I promise you there is a solution, especially in this day and age. I just put in Google alternatives to baby formula, and I got pages and pages of websites. So, yet the media and lots of women and mothers are choosing to focus on something that for the moment they cannot change, when their time and energy would be much better spent just being like water and finding ways over, under, around, and through. Tearfully talking to the local news anchor person isn't doing a thing to get your baby fed. There's one thing that water never is, and that is helpless. Water always finds a way and doesn't stay, as Andrew Martin just said, overly attached to a temporary container. Feeding your baby commercial baby formula that you can buy at the grocery store is a container that our modern society for the last 150 years has become accustomed to. But when that container gets turned on its side, if you're like water, you just drop right out and find a different container, because that's the quality of water. And here's another one. It doesn't stop flowing until it finds its own natural stopping point, which is dictated by gravity, not by the container. Have you ever seen a little drop of water running down a window pane? When it gets to the wood part at the end of the glass, it doesn't just stop. It just starts flowing horizontally across the wood until it finds another opening and goes down again. So it finds the perfect balance. Okay, water doesn't stop. Like when you see water running along the sidewalk or wherever and it stops, it has only stopped because it has found a perfect place of balance. Nothing stops it until it finds its own level of balance. All right, so in other words, water stops on its own terms. That is another quality of water we can adopt into our lives. No government or economy determines when we stop. We do. That's actually something else that he talks about. Continuing on, he says, water also finds its own level. And this is a way we can remind ourselves that we don't have to have our hands in every single thing. We can relax and let go of control because the universe is self-correcting. So a minute ago I said nature is self-correcting. Well, the universe is nature. So just trust it. In other words, when you come face to face with an obstacle, don't let that obstacle dictate to you when you're going to stop or how things are going to be from now on. Trust the universe, your higher nature, to guide you over, under, around, or through until you find a solution. He wraps up by saying, anything that is unresolved or not entirely clear and still a little tangled, just let go. Be like water and let the situation find its own level. Okay, so before I continue, I didn't think I was going to say this, but it just now came to my mind. A lot of problems just seem to solve themselves. I heard Steve Harvey say one time that whenever a relative would call him and he would not, and he knew he didn't want to talk to him, he'd let it go to voicemail and he would listen. And if they wanted something, he said he would always wait 2 weeks before he would call them back. And he said 9 times out of 10, they would have found another way on their own without his involvement. All right, so back to Raymond Tang. He opened his talk by saying that he had learned 3 important lessons from water, specifically the passage in the Tao Te Ching about water. So the first was humility, because water stays low and always seeks the low point, as well as helping everything in its path to live and grow as it flows, never stopping to expect any thanks or recognition. Water is also freely available to whoever wants it, as in the water itself has no mechanism by which it tells some people, yes, you can drink me, yes, you can bathe in me, and no, you can't. I mean, I know that water is not readily available everywhere, but the places it is, everybody can use it. Water itself doesn't discriminate. So, the second lesson then that he talked about after humility was harmony, how water works with and within its immediate surroundings. Water is adaptable. It doesn't let any obstacle in its way stop it. It simply keeps flowing, whether it's underneath, above, around, or through. It keeps being itself and doing what it does. The final lesson he gives in this talk is of the openness of water. He says water is open to change. Depending on the temperature, water can take the form of a liquid, a solid, or a gas. Water's ability to adapt, change, and remain flexible is what has made it so enduring throughout the ages, despite all the changes in our environment. And that's actually the only constant in our world, change. We, like water, must constantly adapt to these changes, reinvent ourselves, refresh our skills, and remain flexible and open in order to survive and endure. Then he talks about the company that he works for and something they regularly do, which is have these meetings called hackathons, where they divide up into smaller groups and brainstorm about ways they can improve what they're doing or solve problems that they're encountering through things they called hacks or shortcuts, the most efficient way to do something. And he says, what's interesting to me is that the team that usually wins is not the one with the most experienced members, but rather with the members who are open to learn, open to unlearn, and who are willing to help each other navigate through changing and challenging circumstances. All right, so did you hear that? The team that wins because they are open to learn new things, new ways to approach issues, to unlearn the old ways that worked in the past, but that now have evolved and changed, and who are willing to help each other navigate through challenging and changing circumstances. That would be the opposite of the attitude of, if you don't do it my way, I'm taking my ball and going home. If you have a different idea than me or a different belief, then I am no longer willing to interact or engage with you. I'm just going to shut down and stop flowing. Water never does that. And honestly, for a lot of us, that's our first reaction to any sort of obstacle or circumstance, whether it's in our personal life or out in the world at large. If it's not the way I want it, I'm going to sit down right here and I am not going to move any further. I will put my hands over my ears and not listen to anything anyone else has to say. So have you ever seen a child do that? They're playing a game and all of a sudden something doesn't go their way, and so they just sit down and do this. They even go, I'm not listening. So yeah, that's childish behavior. That's why children do it. It's also resisting what is, which doesn't get us very far. Now, this is a different teaching for another time, but I want to clarify that there's a difference between resisting what is and the sacred no. There is a time to say no and to draw a line, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about becoming so attached to the way things have been that you are unable to adapt and keep flowing, keep moving forward when things change. And guess what? Things are always going to change. That's why it is so important, as he's saying here, to stay open. So he ends his talk with these words. Life calls each and every one of us to step up, to open up, and to cause a ripple effect. We can let the changes and challenges of life paralyze us and continue to live in our self-limiting beliefs, or we can open up and enjoy the ride, because life is an amazing experience. And, indeed it is. So what have we learned today from looking at water and using it as a template of sorts for our spiritual practice as it is used in the Tao Te Ching. I've been saying for a while now, our spiritual practice, those things we do every day, those practices we adopt, like meditation, like affirmations, like prayer, and learning how to stay in our center and pursue peace and always seek the middle way. All those things we say we believe in and that have proven to lead us into a better way of life, face with an obstacle. When 50 years of social progress and precedent gets overturned, and all of a sudden we're living in a new world and in a different environment. And our choices are sit down, put our hands over our ears and refuse to continue participating in this new reality, or find a way to flow, whether it's under, over, through, or around. And as we heard today from Andrew Martin, we can view it as a dry desert in front of us that's going to be hard and full of pain and struggle, or we can envision those two beautiful waterfalls on either side of us where we're standing on a lily pad with a little treasure chest in front of us containing within it every single thing we need. Necessity is the mother of invention. Mother. It's interesting that that's the concept that is front and center right now. Motherhood. If nothing ever changed, there would never be the need to invent anything new or to progress. So let's not always immediately view change as bad, even if it looks that way in the immediate. And for goodness sake, let's stop allowing every change and every shift that comes along to further divide us from each other. It's been going on long enough now to see a pattern emerging. Black Lives Matter, COVID, now the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the whole gun control issue, whether or not we still have the ability to run fair elections in this country. They are all just opportunities for us to put our spiritual values into actual practice. This is not a drill. This is actually happening. Are we choosing peace? Are we choosing love? Are we speaking with kindness? Are we looking for truth? Or are we just looking for information and facts that support what we already believe? In times like these, it's good to remember what my brother said on Sunday. Let's make sure our passion doesn't trump our kindness. You can disagree with someone kindly. Danielle Laporte, the woman from whose writings I based the morning blessing on that we begin this service with every week, she put this on Instagram last week, and I love it. She said, "Hold steady. Many people are feeling a reeling kind of shock from the U.S. ruling against women's body autonomy and wisdom. Upon impact, breathe. Get still and alert. That way, you can see the rage and the fear without getting swallowed up and made delirious by it." And then in parentheses, she put, "That's how darkness temporarily gets the upper hand, when we get lost in the rage and in the fear. Stay in your heart, then unify with all women, pro, for, against, shocked, scared, proud, satisfied, all levels of consciousness, pain, and power. We have to move toward each other. We cannot let divisiveness split our wisdom. Prioritize loving compassion, and we will move through this stunning challenge with love." Beautiful, beautiful. So all these things I've been bringing to you and sharing with you week after week, it's not just to hear myself talk. Hopefully it's been so we can all use these things to help us, as Raymond Tang said, navigate challenging and changing situations, just like this one. Let's go back to Dr. Kim Jaramo for a moment. What does she advise when you come to a moment that you think you can't handle or a circumstance that seems insurmountable? She says, stop and ask yourself, what else is possible here? What else could be the final outcome instead of what they're saying on the news, or instead of the negative thing my mind jumped to, because there's still a part of my brain that's reptilian from millions of years ago. But oh yeah, I don't have to listen to that anymore. There is a higher vibration I can get to. There is a better way to do this. Spirit, help me find it. Hopefully, that's the place where my teachings on Tuesday morning have helped you to get. I want to end with some inspirational words again from Andrew Martin. I couldn't explain what I'm feeling about this things right now any better than the way he says it here. He says, "Why are you selling yourself short? You have the entire universe at your disposal through your connection to Spirit. So why are you still showing up so small? You know, people don't have to accept you. Even politically, we've created this illusion where we believe that we can have a whole world that is cultivated and curated to our constant liking and comfort. We believe no one is allowed to call us anything other than what we prefer and to use words that we have chosen as acceptable. All of these identity politics at their core are very meaningful, but what it has turned into is a reality we have created where we expect and almost demand that nothing will ever offend us or upset us or trigger us, and if it does, then we have every right to be upset and play the victim. No, there is no guarantee written anywhere in any document that says you have the right to not be offended or upset or triggered. But you contain within you all of the universe. So what on earth do you have to complain about? And I understand, speaking as someone who has unraveled my own PTSD and dismantled my own trauma response, that when you grow up in a world where everything's a nail, you become a hammer. When you grow up in an environment where everything is traumatic and dangerous, you don't necessarily know how not to react immediately out of self-preservation. I get it. There is another way to live, but you have to choose it, and you have to want it. And most importantly, you have to remember that you are the one who will create it. You just have to say, Spirit, I'm ready. I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't know exactly where I have to go or what I have to do, but I am ready. I am ready to know who I am. That's the prayer. We have to let Spirit help us take those inspirational quotes on posters from an academic understanding to an actual embodiment of them. We have to bring those things we've learned and say that we believe into our vessel so that our entire being is infused with the truth of who we are. But remember, when you pray for patience, you don't get patience, you get the opportunity to be patient. When you pray for peace, you don't get peace, you get the opportunity to be peace. And it's the same with abundance or love or anything else in your life. So when you pray for strength and for a reminder of how strong you are, you will be given an opportunity to remember that. All you have to do is choose another way. If you always say yes, try saying no. If you always speak up, try being silent this time. Whatever thing you have not yet done, do it now. So that's what Andrew Martin has to offer, and I wholeheartedly agree. And what he's describing here is exactly what we've been talking about today. Be like water. Learn how to flow. Learn humility, seek harmony, and remain open. When an obstacle presents itself in front of you, choose another path, because there is always another path, and there is always a choice. Ask Spirit to help you choose wisely and just keep flowing. Amen. Amen. So please join us tomorrow night at 6:30 for our continuing series, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, and we will also see you on this Sunday. I love you. Be at peace. I will see you next Tuesday.